A Song of Ice and Fire hot take of the day. I'm not too big a fan of the Boltons, and I think someone really should do something about them in the Winds of Winter. So let's talk about what I'm starting to think might happen to them. In the last video on my channel, I talked about George R. R. Martin's leaked outline for A Song of Ice and Fire that was part of his original pitch letter, and I basically tried to play connect the dots between that pitch letter version of the story, the actual version of the story as it's grown to exist in the current books, and then also the version of the story that we got in the television show, which was, I think, trying to capture the ending at least in broad strokes, at least in their own TV show sort of version of events. I would definitely recommend you go check out that video if you haven't seen it. I think I found some interesting things there that have sort of changed the way that I look at this original outline. And the most interesting one of them is one of the things that this video is going to be building off of. Some of the most interesting things about that original leaked outline were the fact that originally Tyrion was going to be the one to siege and burn Winterfell rather than Theon and Ramsay sort of combining to do the job. And there was also going to be this love triangle between Tyrion, Arya, and Jon Snow, who would have been madly in love with each other, and Arya would have actually not been across the narrow sea in Braavos. It seems she would have been, at least at the end of the outline, north of the wall with Bran. So the interesting thing that I noticed last video and I talked about was that basically this original love triangle as it was set up, it would seem, has been reconstructed in the current story as of the end of A Dance of Dragons. Remember, Tyrion was going to be the one who had originally burned Winterfell, and instead that's Ramsay, and Jon Snow was seemingly being tempted away from his vows at the Wall by his love for Arya and this love triangle between him, Arya, and Tyrion, who would have taken and burned Winterfell. So yeah, the guy who took and burned Winterfell, and Arya and Jon Snow in a situation that tempts Jon Snow away from the Wall. Well, George recreated that with substituting in Ramsay instead of Tyrion, a fake Arya instead of Arya, and he had Jon Snow still tempted by the same thing, just to get the outline back on track. As I explained in the last video, it really does seem like the situation was set up to be Arya Stark, who may have been north of the Wall gaining some old god style powers, and Jon Snow, who would have been growing in power at the Wall. Well, they would have come together and then potentially used their combined powers to take back Winterfell. And what exactly happened in the television show? Well, it was Sansa who substituted in instead of the fake Arya to recreate the situation. And what happened? Well, it was Jon Snow using his wildling army, and Sansa using her army of the Vale, and the two of them combined to take back Winterfell. As I mentioned last video, the characters go away, they gain their magical powers, they gain their level ups, whatever it is, and then they come back and they can set their home in order using their new magical powers, right? Like that's a good storytelling structure. So if George is doing that, that would make a lot of sense, and it seems like this original plot beat has always been Jon Snow and one of his sisters would team up to take back Winterfell. In the original outline, it was going to be Jon and Arya up at the Wall, sort of combining to come take it from Tyrion, and in the show, it was Jon and Sansa with their armies that they had each gained over their course of their journey, and they come together and sandwich Ramsay and the Boltons. Now, basically, one of the cases that I was trying to make last video is, okay, I think you can sort of take the dots that you can connect from the original outline and the television show ending and sort of meet in the middle and then, add in the foreshadowing that we're getting from our current story. And where all those things sort of combine up, I think that's where you find good theories. So, in the situation we're in the books right now, we have the fake Arya there, not Sansa, nor the real Arya. So, what is going on here? Who's going to team up with Jon Snow to take back Winterfell? It's not going to be either Arya or Sansa, is it? Could Jane Poole have some magical power she's gained? Well, no, actually, I think it's just going to be Arya. We have the fake Arya in there substituting in for the real Arya. Jon Snow thinks it's the real Arya as of the time he gets killed, and I think that the real Arya still has enough magical power that she's gained over the course of this story that she can do the job she needs to do. So let's remember the two examples we're comparing to here. It was Jon Snow and Arya potentially in the original outline with their magical powers combining to take back Winterfell. And in the television show, it was Jon Snow and Sansa. Again, remember in the show they sort of cut down on all the magic, so it makes complete sense that it's Jon Snow and Sansa with their armies that they've gained over the course of their journey. So, is there a situation that can sort of meet in the middle of these situations and also include Arya? Well, what's an army in the south that Arya has gained throughout the course of this story, who could make their way north when Jon is trying to take Winterfell from the Boltons, and sandwich the Boltons exactly like Sansa did with her army of the Vale? That's right, it's of course Nymeria's wolf pack, set up perfectly to do exactly what the army of the Vale did, and therefore returning to the plot beat of Jon Snow teaming up with Arya and her newfound magical powers to take back Winterfell. And I think this is the option that George is probably going to go for in the Winds of Winter. In recent videos on the channel, I talked a lot about the setup that I see going on for Mel trying to birth a shadow baby with Jon Snow to target it at Ramsay Bolton. She's fairly explicit about this in Dance with Dragons that that's her goal. So if she wants to start attacking the Boltons with shadows from the north, this seems like the type of thing that, if successful, might eventually drive the Boltons and their entire host out of Winterfell. And so, if they want to magically sandwich the Boltons with their newfound powers, I think a decent Winds of Winter version of this event would be Jon Snow's shadow babies and Stannis' army driving the Boltons out of Winterfell into the mouths of a giant hungry wolf pack for all the North to see as the Boltons get chomped down on and destroyed by, the sigil of House Stark. This theory also has the bonus added easy explanation of okay, if this is going to happen, why didn't they do it in the show? Well, they cut down on the magic so much that none of the other Stark kids were wargs, so that wasn't ever going to happen. And the CGI for Nymeria's Wolfpack was way too expensive, so that was never going to happen. Also, when I was talking about the pink letter a couple videos ago on my channel, I brought up that I had thought of another potential way that maybe you could get Ramsay outside of the walls of Winterfell if that was needed for Jon Snow's Shadow Baby to hit him. Well, I did consider what if Nymeria's Wolfpack shows up at Winterfell and either just climbs over the snowdrift or makes their way in through a break in the wall or something where the snowdrift is piled up, and because of the damage to Winterfell, they're able to just fill it with wolves. A bunch of wolves invading Winterfell, chasing the Boltons out where they're vulnerable to a Shadow Baby attack on Ramsay. That would also be a very strong sign to the north that the Starks are coming back magically, and the time for fucking around is over. You better put a Stark back in Winterfell right now. So it took an extra video to actually get there because I got sidetracked by that whole outline shenanigans, but at the same time, I do think that, yeah, there's a decent chance that, Jon Snow and Arya are going to do this sort of magical sandwich on the Boltons, and maybe the Wolfpack could get inside of Winterfell and actually chase the Boltons out, and then the Shadow Baby could take it from there, and then the wolves come in and clean up the bodies. And let's remember, this wouldn't even be the first time that Arya is taking action inside the body of Nymeria. And also, weirdly enough, as we talked about last episode, if Catelyn Stark being resurrected from the dead was also part of the original plotline, well, this is not even the first time that George has used Nymeria to get another character back onto the original plotline. Shortly after the Red Wedding, Arya has a wolf dream where she's in Nymeria and she pulls Catelyn's body from the river. And she even thinks, rise, run with us, eat with us, or something like that. So basically, Arya pulls Catelyn out of the river and wishes for her to come back from the dead, and that's what happens. So if that was always the plan with Catelyn, well, Arya has gotten her back on track, and we've established that Nymeria's Wolfpack is a way that Arya can take some magical actions around Westeros even when she physically can't take the action herself. So if the original idea for Winterfell being taken back is a combination of Jon Snow and Arya taking magical action, well, maybe this Wolfpack is going to be the way that Arya does that. So I think there's a decent chance that Arya could have a dream where she's inside Nymeria, helping Jon Snow take back Winterfell by chomping down on the Boltons. I don't know if I'm going to do this yet as of the recording of this video, but I'm so tempted to just title this video Arya Will Eat Ramsay Bolton and just put a picture of Arya's face as the thumbnail. I'm probably not going to do that, but you know whether I have or not, and if I didn't, now you know I was considering it. The main reason that I'm probably not going to call it that is because I think there's a decent chance that, Jon Snow's Shadow Baby will be directly targeted at Ramsay, so they might get the kill on him, but, maybe direwolves eat his body, maybe Nymeria eats his body, so there is a way in which I could genuinely see the theory being, in its shortest form, Arya will eat Ramsay Bolton. And really, when you think about it, how fitting is that, right? He's the guy who hunts down girls with his hounds and has them eaten alive. How fitting for him to be eaten alive by a wolf that has a girl inside of it. That aspect of it to me just feels like it hits really well because he's naming these dogs after women he's hunted with them, sort of putting part of their essence right into these dogs, and now he's getting killed by this wolf who has the essence of a traumatized girl looking for revenge inside the wolf. The more that I think about it, it feels like Ramsay's almost perfectly created to be eaten by Arya inside Nymeria. Editing Michael here, jumping in because I hadn't quite brushed up on the exact details of Ramsay's shenanigans with the hounds lately. He actually does kill them first, and then the hounds eat their dead bodies, so maybe Ramsay being killed by Jon Snow's Shadow Baby and then his body eaten by Arya in Nymeria is actually really the most fitting way that this could go down. At least if you want to mirror what he does to the women he hunts, because that seems like the most fitting way for him to die, so yeah, maybe this is actually what's going to happen. Jon gets the kill with the Shadow Baby, and Arya eats the body. Also, let's remember how Ramsay ended up being killed in the show. He was fed to his hounds by Sansa. And since she doesn't have a direwolf and she was the sister there married to him rather than the fake Arya, well, that seems to me like a pretty direct one-to-one substitution for Arya's wolves eating Ramsay. Also, for what it's worth, I think it's pretty perfectly set up for her to eat Roose as well, if that's what it comes to, because there was that whole interaction between Arya and Roose that happens in the books where Tywin took his place in the show. So we do have some history between Arya and Roose as well that feels like it would be being paid off pretty nicely. So it feels like just on both ends there's a lot of decent setup for Arya and her wolf pack to be chomping down on the Boltons. This basically just meets perfectly with the original framework, doesn't it? Like, Arya, if she's gaining her magical powers, Jon Snow, if he's gaining power at the Night's Watch, eventually they were going to be tempted to put their powers together and take back Winterfell when Jon eventually abandons his vows. Now, in the actual books, we have a situation set up where Jon's either going to be ending up at the Night Fort and sending his magic south, or he's maybe just actually physically going to march south with wildlings and Melisandre and Jon Snow being resurrected, marching south with a somewhat magical host, but again, I think him setting up at the Night Fort is at least somewhat set up. So, Jon Snow's magic at least is going to be coming south, Arya's magic is going to be coming north, and they're going to make a big stark magical sandwich on the Boltons, exactly as was planned in the original outline, all the way back when this was actually Arya and Jon Snow against Tyrion. And exactly like what was done in the television show, minus all the cool magic, because that seems to be roughly the recipe for the late seasons of the television show. A lot of the ending events of A Song of Ice and Fire, minus all the cool magic. Now, I think there are actually a few more things that George R. R. Martin has said that give some evidence that he's planning roughly something like this. The first thing that George said was he's compared this wolf pack to a Chekhov's gun, basically saying you don't hang a big wolf pack on the wall unless you intend to use it. So he's confirmed that Arya's wolf pack is going to do something important, and I think considering Arya's magic seemingly was originally supposed to be teaming up with Jon Snow to take back Winterfell, well, this seems like a pretty reasonable option. They do have to make their way up to the north, but geographically they're about as far away as the Army of the Vale was, and if they've been on the move sort of undetected ever since we've last heard about them, they could already be partway there. We do hear rumors of the Wolfpack terrorizing the Riverlands, but it's just a quick dart up the neck and up the King's Road a little ways into the north, which, for a giant Wolfpack, obviously they would probably be seen, but who knows if one of our point of view characters would really hear about it. It's not like the rumors in the Riverlands would suddenly stop if, there wasn't a wolf attack for like a month or whatever. If you're being terrorized by wild animals just because you don't see them for a few weeks, you don't suddenly just assume the problem is over. In the modern day with internet, we could definitely keep track of that stuff more clearly, but when you're talking about peasants being attacked by wolves and things like that, where news takes months to travel places anyway, it's not like there's going to be an up to date notice that, like, oh, hey, there's been no attacks in the last month. You're just going to assume, like, oh, they're on the other side of the woods for the last few weeks. So basically, the point is that the talk and fear of the wolf pack around the Riverlands will definitely persist long after the wolf pack has actually left, assuming they actually do leave. So, they could, as I said, have been on the move for quite a while, we don't really know. Which would leave them popping up somewhere in the north if the Boltons are fleeing south out of Winterfell. Well, that would be in the perfect realm of unexpected but not completely unrealistic, which is perfectly where you want to leave a plot twist hanging. So basically, the option that most people think that the Wolfpack is going towards is going to be the phrase, but at the same time, that's what many people think the Brotherhood without banners is going to be going after. So they don't both need to wipe out the phrase, so I think maybe the phrase with Nymeria's Wolfpack is a little bit of a red herring, and maybe they're going to make their way north for the Winds of Winter. The second thing that George has apparently said that I hadn't heard about before, but I heard in a recent Quinn the GM video about where's the safest place in Westeros in the Winds of Winter, and one of the things that he brought up is apparently when George was writing for the show in the early seasons, he made a note in a script how they need to foreshadow a conflict between Ramsay's hounds and dire wolves. So, if Ramsay's hounds are going to be fighting dire wolves, that either means that in the story it's going to just be one dire wolf with Jon Snow coming south, unless like Rickon and Jon Snow are going to team up, which actually I guess maybe that could be what's going on, right? And maybe Rickon and Jon Snow are both going to be there, so that's how there's two dire wolves. But otherwise, it seems like maybe the wolves, plural, that he's talking about could be Nymeria's wolf pack eventually closing in and attacking the Boltons or Ramsay and his hounds. I don't know the exact wording of whatever note George made in that early script, but at the same time, I do know that on any level, him foreshadowing hounds and direwolves fighting is something that I find very interesting, especially in the context of this theory. There are only so few options for what George could be foreshadowing when he's talking about Ramsay's hounds fighting direwolves, so yeah, I do think that of the few options we have, this one is at least a coin flip's likelihood, right? Like, Arya's wolf pack has to do something, someone has to do something about the Boltons. As we've talked about, they're sort of mirroring the situation in the show with Sansa, so her army from the south sandwiched the Boltons with Jon. I think that if Nymeria's wolf pack fills that role in the Winds of Winter, that makes quite a bit of sense. So basically, to sum it up, I think that Nymeria, and by extension Arya, will eat the Boltons in the Winds of Winter. She will share this bountiful feast with the giant wolf pack she's been building over the last several books, and send a strong reminder to the North of just what happens when anyone messes with the Starks. A modern day example of just the sort of magical thing that just ends up happening anytime they're taken out of power, which would sort of go a ways to explaining why they've been in power for so long. Arya doesn't even know she's been building up a wolf pack this entire time, really, or she hasn't necessarily been doing it on purpose, but the Starks are just so darn protected by the old gods that goofy magic shenanigans are going to put them back in power, whether they're doing it on purpose or not. This is a theory that, as I said in the last video, I've come to sort of really like and at this point believe as I've gone through this outline. Maybe I could be talked out of it, but it feels like there's just a ton of circumstantial evidence, and ever since I've sort of considered this and looked at all of this in context, it feels like, yeah, maybe this is what the Wolfpack's going to do. I'd love to hear what any of you guys think of that down in the comments, and make sure to like and subscribe while you're there. That's all I've got for you today. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back with something else very soon.